Well, we come to the Feast of the Epiphany, and we have, you certainly heard me on this for many years if you've been a parishioner here. And, as I say, I want to maybe highlight some of the points that I've talked to you about over the years with this feast, starting with the identity of the Magi. There's a lot of books out there and a lot of speculation today trying to get to the bottom. Who were the Magi, and so on. And I think the main point we don't want to miss about them isn't whether they were magicians or astrologers or wise men or kings, but rather that they're Gentiles, and that's at the heart of their identity in terms of their significance for us today. And I say that because up until now, in the Christmas story, pretty much it's been the Jews who have experienced Christ's presence and have been summoned. So we see obviously Joseph and Mary are Jews, Jesus, of course. We see also maybe some members of their family who aren't named elsewhere, but we also see that the shepherds and others were certainly most likely all Jews. But now we see the Magi, when they come, we kind of complete the nativity scene. And think of the nativity scene as kind of a little scale replica or a little model of the church. So we now have the Gentiles arriving to find it and to adore Christ. All of this points forward to the great call of the Gentiles that Jesus will inaugurate when he says, "Go therefore unto all the nations and teach them everything I've commanded you and baptize them." So again, St. Paul says in the second reading, here's the mystery kept hidden, but now revealed to us, that the Gentiles are now co-heirs with the Jews in the promises of salvation. So that's an amazingly, this is the kind of stuff that should, if you really think about it, make you jump for joy. The Gentiles have made it to the nativity scene. So look at the nativity scene, and you'll see a kind of a miniature replica of the church. You have saints and sinners. I think of Joseph and Mary as saints. Obviously Jesus, but he's also God. But we also have, some of the shepherds. I'm not beating up on their reputation, but they were in the category sinners, as were the Magi. We have saints and sinners. We have people who are very wealthy. The Magi seem to have very expensive gifts they can offer. And we have the poor, Joseph, Mary, the shepherds. We have also the very learned, very simple. We have men and women and so on. And so all of these are ways of saying that there's a little replica, if you will, of the church. And of course, Jesus Christ is at the center. Jesus Christ is the head of the body of the church. So all of these are ways of saying that this feast of the Epiphany, Christ is manifest to the nations. And that's, I think, the key identity you want to see regarding the Magi. And we can speculate forever about this Greek word and what they really were, who they really were, where they really were from, and so on. All right. I think also the star has an interesting quality. In the Catholic Church, we believe, obviously, in the infallibility of Scripture, the inerrancy of it, shall we say, as well. And we believe that all Scripture is inspired and so on. But, God doesn't just speak through the Scriptures. He also speaks in the book of creation. Everything he made, St. Paul says it in Romans 1, that all these things which God has made to tell us about his deity and the quality of order and good purpose that God has. And so the Gentiles, he said, who refused to know him, were without excuse. So they had the book of creation. Now, not all Gentiles, but the point is that these Gentiles, for example, they see something from the natural order, a star. And here, too, we can speculate forever. Was it this planet with that planet? Was it this? Was it that? At the end of the day, the point is that God speaks to these Gentiles who don't have Scripture. He calls them in a way that they understand. And in this case, these Magi seem to have been aware of the stars and signals and signs, and they followed this sign, and they found Christ. And so again, the book of creation, if you will, we believe as Catholics that creation is not to simply be ignored. Creation is not just dumbly here. Creation is a revelation from God, and it has a powerful way of teaching us about the God who made it, who put all things in order and has done all things well. And the amazing love and just rich order and beauty of this creation speaks to us of the majesty and the glory of God. So much so that some ancient cultures worshipped things like the sun, creatures like the moon and or animals and certain things. Of course, they were mistaken, but again, there is something revealed of God in what He has made, and this too is a form of revelation. Now, the next thing we want to talk a little bit about is that the Magi show a lot of tenacity. And the Jewish people who should have been aware of all these things weren't. And the Gentiles seem to be hyper aware. So they come some 600 miles. They come from Arabia, some 600 miles. And they come to the place where they expect to find celebrations if a newborn king has been born. But everything's very quiet. Jerusalem seems to be quite quiet. There's no obvious celebrations going on. So they come to Herod. They figure, well, he's the reigning monarch. Maybe he'll know. He's got to be one of his own sons. So again, they say, well, where's the newborn king of the Jews? We saw it star in his writing. He goes, what? And, he can't figure it out. He immediately calls the temple leaders to come and say, look, they're talking about the star. Decode the situation. And so Herod inquires, and they tell him, yes, this is in fact a prophecy, and that he would be found in Bethlehem of Judea. Now, what's amazing is their lack of, just astonishment. I mean, think about it. And if you looked at all the readings in today's Mass, you'll see there's a lot of references in the Psalms to kings from the east bearing gifts of gold and frankincense. There's camels, dromedaries. In other words, that's a camel coming from the east bearing gifts for the king. That there's a star rising in Jacob announcing the great Messiah. That all of these prophecies are just being ticked off one after another. Check, 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 check. And it's like, what? You say, Herod, that these Magi with camels bearing gifts of gold and frankincense have come to the east following a star? They should be sounding the trumpets, the Messiah. These are all prophecies of the Messiah. They should be awake, alert. But it's almost like he got them out of bed. And they're sort of, fumbling through the scrolls. And, well, it says here that you, Bethlehem, Judah, are by no means one of the least. So, if he's been born, he'll be found in Bethlehem of Judea. Can I go back to bed now, Herod? Where's the celebration? Where's the joy? Where is the elation at these prophecies being fulfilled? It's just not there. Now, Herod, the wicked Herod, he's wide awake, but the saints are sleepy. And these Magi must be really confused at this point. You think, we're here to celebrate with you, and none of you seem to want to celebrate. The only guy that even cares seems to be anxious about this thing. What's going on? So, again, this is a powerful part of the story that you have to kind of read between the lines a little bit, but it's the lack of any encouragement. Look, I mean, the absolute great events of salvation are unfolding right in front of them, and these leaders of the church are asleep. Things have not changed, my friends. Too many of the clergy are asleep. This has been a perennial problem, like when the disciples were asleep in the garden just before the great showdown with Satan, and Jesus is going to go die, and they're nodding off to sleep. Likewise, again, and when I say the leaders of the church, let's not fail to include some lay people like parents and others who just don't seem to be that concerned as they should be, or alive and joyful as they should be about a lot of things. This is sort of our nature. Jesus lamented it, didn't he? He said, he says the sons of this world are much more, alive and dealing with their kind than are the sons of light. Jesus had to shake his head. We are very lazy, very slothful, sleepy. Regarding the shepherds of Israel, God said regarding them at one point, they love to sleep. And that's what we see here. So we can poke fun at them, but again, none of us can simply say, hey, we're alert to the signs of the times. Not so much. All right. So what we see next is that they do get their directions. They go into Bethlehem and they come to the house where they find Jesus with his mother Mary. Now Joseph isn't mentioned, but I'm sure that he was nearby. We have then an astonishing thing that takes place. They don't just kind of go and give royal obsequies like a curtsy for women, but a genuflection on the left knee, not the right knee. That's for God, but the left knee. They don't do that. They do something far more. They fall on the ground, proskenuo, which means, in Greek, it means it's adoration. It means to prostrate. It says they prostrated themselves, but it's a particular kind of prostration that indicates worship. Okay. So again, do they have a complete, baptizable faith here? I'm not saying they don't need to go to RCIA, but they get it. This is no ordinary king, and something's touched their heart. See, and God has given them some rudimentary faith to see beyond, and so they adore him, they worship him, and that is a profound thing. And again, this is an image. Remember, it's not just these three wise men or however many there were. It's the Gentiles, see, now coming to worship. All sorts of prophecies in the Old Testament said that one day Jerusalem would be filled with the Gentiles who will say, "Come, let us go to God's mountain, that he may instruct us in his ways and we may walk in his paths," and so again, all the nations would be summoned one day, and now we're seeing it. All right. Now, they give him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Now, at some level, gold is appropriate gift for a king, and so on. But let's look at there's a significance, I think, just a real quick significance. We could develop it more, but just for now, something rather to the point. Gold means the gifts of really all my wealth and possessions, okay? So it's a symbol of that. So they give the gift of their possessions. Likewise, the frankincense, that's an image of worship. I think it's the 48th Psalm. It says, "Let my prayer rise like incense, and the lifting of my hands like an evening offering." So incense is a sign or a symbol of worship. And then myrrh is an unusual thing. It's usually in the form of ointment, and it was used to anoint bodies that had died before they were wrapped up in all the linens. And so it was a very aromatic, very perfumey oil, and it was meant to, pardon the expression, but keep the smell down. And it was used to anoint bodies after a person died, see? Now, that's the gift of my whole life that I give to God. So you see, these three gifts are very significant. They're not just arbitrary. Some people wonder what they did with that gold. and maybe the frankincense. And by the way, myrrh was quite costly. So you see, and again, I don't know. There's no evidence that they went and just, spent a lot of it or bought a bigger house or something. But all I know is that's not the point for us. The point is that these gifts are very symbolic. So again, are you and I willing to put all of our possessions, all of our wealth, all of our income under the Lord's authority and say, "Lord, these are really yours, and I want to be stewardship so that I use them in a way you want me to use them," see? And likewise, do I give God his due, namely his worship and praise and thanksgiving? I owe that to God. Am I there every Sunday to praise him? Likewise, do I frequently throughout the week pray and thank the Lord? See, I owe this to God. It's not just, "Oh, well, if I get around to it, it would be nice and it would console me a little." It's not about you. It's not about me. It's about God. God is worthy of our praise and thanksgiving and worship and gratitude. Okay. Now, so do I do that? So my possessions, my worship. And then again, finally, am I willing to die so that Christ can live in me? Do I submit my life as a kind of sacrifice to the Lord? See, it's tough. These things indicate great detachment, and detachment is a lifelong process for us to get free of these things that sort of hold us, you see. And so these gifts are beautiful examples of the journey of faith we all have to make. The final thing we see in this story is there's a sign of conversion. It says that having been warned in a dream, they didn't return to Herod. Rather, they went back to their country by another route. So conversio, you hear the word verse or versus, which means to turn, right? So we see they go in a different direction, see, and they were singing a gospel song, "I'm walking up the King's Highway," right? If you're not walking, start while I'm talking, walking up the King's Highway. And so it's a beautiful story, this story of the Magi. It has so many beautiful elements of faith, hearing the call of God. It was not you who chose me, I chose you. So the Lord called us, you see. And then, yes, we've had to overcome some difficulties. The church is not always, our parents are not always perfect examples. The church is not always a perfect example. Sometimes the saints are sleepy. Sometimes there's even great wickedness in the church. Somehow we have to sort of overcome some of these things to still find Christ. And I'm glad all of you have been able to do that. And I would say that we also, I've often found that people who come through the conversion or the RCIA process have often had to sort of overlook a lot of. It doesn't seem like some of our Catholic parishes are very alive. They say, how can they not be alive? They've got the Eucharist. They've got Jesus and the Blessed Sacrament. This is often what brings them. Wow. And, they kind of come in and we're sort of sleepy. We're sort of dressed down. And it's not very obvious that we believe in the true presence by the way we act or pray or dress or conduct ourselves. Thanks again to all of our more recent converts who've come to us and been able to overlook a lot. And so these wise men, they encountered a lot of sleepy saints, but they were tenacious and they found Christ. And they, like we, gave gifts that are very symbolic, and they experienced conversion. A true encounter with Jesus Christ leaves no one unchanged. Okay, and so they're changed by this experience, and they return to their country and so on. Now, and that's the beauty of this story. Now, what happened when they returned, we don't know any of that. The point is for us, there's a picture here of a journey in faith. There's a picture here of the church. There are some things for us to meditate on, and that's the main purpose of this story. Okay, happy Feast of the Epiphany. By the way, in the ancient church, this feast is actually older than Christmas. It was part of actually a three-part feast where three epiphanies were put together. There is the finding of Christ by the Magi. There's also the baptism of Christ in the Jordan, and there's also the wedding feast at Cana. These three things were linked together in the very early church as a common feast day of Epiphany, and since then we've separated them out. But at first, these were epiphanies, that is to say, manifestations of the Lord. Who is this Jesus who's been born to us? Who is he? See? And so the first thing teaches us, the Magi come to adore. He's the Lord of all the nations. The second manifestation, the baptism in the Jordan, this is my beloved Son. Listen to him. See? And then the third manifestation, of course, with the wedding feast at Cana, they now come to see through this first miracle he worked, they began to put faith in him. This is no ordinary human being. This is someone who can work miracles. And many of his disciples came to believe in him. They began to understand more richly and deeply who he was at Mary's promptings and by on account of this miracle. So in all these ways, you see, we have a powerful indication or teaching for all of us about who is Jesus Christ, who and what is the church, who are we. And so we thank God for this beautiful and rich feast of the Epiphany. And I wish you all a very happy Epiphany. And if we get a little snow tomorrow night, enjoy it. All right. Bye-bye.